What if I told you that the elegant woman who enchanted millions as Holly Golightly had once carried secret messages for the Dutch resistance, risking her life at just 10 years old? This isn't a Hollywood screenplay. This is the hidden chapter of Audrey Hepburn's life that she rarely spoke about, even decades later. The year was 1940, and the Nazi war machine had just crushed the Netherlands in 5 days. In the small town of Arnhem, a young girl named Audrey Kathleen Rustin was about to witness her world transform into something unimaginable. While most people know her as the sophisticated actress who defined elegance, few know that Audrey's grace was forged in the crucible of war, resistance, and unthinkable courage. Audrey's mother, Baroness Ella van Heemstra, came from Dutch nobility, but when the occupation began, she made a choice that would put her entire family in mortal danger. She quietly began supporting the Dutch resistance. What makes this story even more remarkable is that Audrey's own father had abandoned the family just before the war, leaving them vulnerable and alone. Yet instead of staying hidden, Baroness Ella chose to fight back. Picture this. A 10-year-old girl with enormous dark eyes, already showing signs of the elegance that would later captivate the world. But instead of playing with dolls, young Audrey was learning to carry coded messages hidden in her shoes, walking past German soldiers who had no idea that this innocent-looking child was part of an underground network that was slowly strangling their occupation efforts. Here's what most people never knew. Audrey didn't just carry messages. She used her natural talent for dancing and performing to raise funds for the resistance. At secret gatherings held in basements and abandoned buildings, she would perform ballet routines and short plays for an adult audience who would donate whatever they could spare to support the fighters. Imagine the surreal scene. In a country under brutal occupation, a child dancing gracefully while overhead, Nazi planes patrolled the skies. But the danger was very real. Audrey later recalled how her mother would whisper instructions to her. If anyone stops you, you're just playing. If they ask about the paper in your shoe, you found it and don't know what it says. The consequences of being caught were clear to everyone. Resistance members were shot on sight, and their families often disappeared into concentration camps. The winter of 1944 brought what the Dutch call the Hunger Winter. Food became so scarce that Audrey's family survived on tulip bulbs and nettle soup. Audrey, now 15, had grown tall but remained painfully thin, a condition that would affect her health for the rest of her life. Yet even during this period of starvation, she continued her resistance activities. She later said that performing during those dark months gave people hope, something more precious than food. What would you do if you discovered this truth about someone you thought you knew completely? Most people see Audrey Hepburn and think of Breakfast at Tiffany's, but the real woman behind those iconic roles had already lived through experiences that would break many adults. Here's the detail that makes this story even more incredible. Audrey's uncle, Otto van Limburg-Stirum, was executed by the Nazis for his resistance activities. The family lived with the constant knowledge that they too could be next, yet they continued. Audrey later described watching German soldiers march past their house while she hid coded resistance communications under her mattress. The ordinary courage of a teenager who chose danger over safety, again and again. When Allied forces finally liberated the Netherlands in May 1945, Audrey had been transformed by her experiences. She had seen the worst of humanity, but also its capacity for incredible bravery. The war had ended, but for Audrey, it had revealed something fundamental about herself. She was stronger than she had ever imagined. Years later, when reporters asked about her childhood, Audrey would often deflect, saying simply that the war was a difficult time. She rarely elaborated. It wasn't until much later in life that she began to speak more openly about those years, and even then, she downplayed her own role. "I was just a child doing what my mother told me to do," she would say. But the historical records tell a different story. The elegance and grace that made Audrey Hepburn Hollywood legend weren't just natural gift. They were qualities refined under the most extreme circumstances imaginable. Her famous composure, it came from learning to stay calm while carrying dangerous secret past armed guard. Her empathy and humanitarian work later in life with UNICEF. It grew from a childhood spent witness suffering and choosing help despite person. Think about this the next you watch one of her behind expressive eyes was a woman who had her country occupied, her people starved, her family threatened, yet had chosen courage. The poise you see on screen, room of all. Actual war. Audrey kept many of these stories to herself until she was older, not out what any decent person would do when faced with evil. That perspective, perhaps more than anything else, in final years, when asked about her legacy, Audrey didn't. She talked about the importance of helping children, of standing up for what's right, lessons learned when she was barely old enough to understand them. This was a woman who had risked everything for strangers, and who carried those experiences with quiet dignity, tempered by courage and refined by a child's determination to choose hope over fear. I leave you with, see you in the next video.